We are going to be talking about the Americas today, and so here we go. Here is your first, or your journal. I'm not sure what number you are on, just number it the next one, whatever comes after the journal, the last journal you have for class. And I want you to tell me about a time when you had to adapt to a change in your life, to a new environment, maybe a move or something like that. Adaptation is the theme for this unit on the Americas. So do about a paragraph or so and fill that out as a journal. And then pause this, and when you're ready to go, hit play. Okay, so what is the theory of how people migrated to the Americas? The accepted theory is the land bridge theory, and that is the idea that during the ice ages, the water level of the oceans decreased because there were so many glaciers being formed, and it actually exposed underwater land bridges, and it would have connected right here between Russia and Alaska. There's actually only 5 miles worth of what's called the Bering Strait right here, right now, and underneath the water is land. And so originally the theory was that people populated the Americas by migrating and walking across this land bridge. However, meet Kennewick Man. This is a skeleton that was discovered in Kennewick, Washington, in a riverbed. 2 guys were hiking one day and came across a skull, and so they called the local police. Police show up and discover that actually this skeleton was much too old to be a recent crime, and so they turn it over to archaeologists, who then dig up all the bones and find that this was a nomadic hunter-gatherer, and he's actually the oldest skeleton that ever was discovered anywhere in the Americas. So we can assume that he is a pioneer, one of the earliest people to come to the Western Hemisphere. He also lived quite a difficult life. When his bones were studied, we noticed that there were many broken bones, including cracked and broken ribs, and this very interesting item here in his hip bone. Upon further study, this item that is actually embedded into his bone is an arrowhead. So that tells you a little bit about the lifestyle that he lived. When using modern technology to take his bone structure and put muscle and skin on the bone, we come up with the look of Kennewick Man when he was alive. Would have looked a lot like this, and no, it's not the guy from Star Trek. This is what he would have actually looked like, with hair and wrinkles and whatnot, just before his death. This is Kennewick Man. Here's the problem. If people would have populated the Americas coming over the land bridge from Siberia, which is actually part of Asia, they would have had Asian ethnicity. Kennewick Man clearly is not Asian. So the discovery of this oldest skeleton ever found on the North American continent, and the fact that he's not Asian, he's actually European, tells historians that Europeans must have had technology like boats much earlier on in history, because there's no way that Kennewick Man could have made it to the Americas without some type of assistance like a boat. So Kennewick Man is so important because his discovery challenges the land bridge theory. There's no doubt that people did walk over across a land bridge to the Americas, but we also think that perhaps they were able to have some sort of kayak or canoe, and were able to travel faster on water, which is why a European could make it to the Americas during his lifetime, because you simply couldn't have walked from Europe to America on foot in one lifetime. Okay, so that's how North America is populated, and then as people begin to enter North America and then eventually go through Mexico and Central America down to South America, they have different climates that they have to adapt to. And so our focus then of this unit is, how did Native Americans adapt to their environment? So we're going to look at first the Desert West region, which is hot and dry, home to the Hohokam tribes, who managed to farm in the desert using irrigations. And in order to avoid the heat of the day, their houses were actually holes dug into the ground Later on, they learned to build houses over the top of these pits using a straw and clay mixture called adobe. Here's a picture of a traditional pit house. The sticks you see there would have actually been covered with animal skins to provide some shade, and they would have gone into their houses during the middle of the day or the hottest part of the day to escape the heat, and then come back out later and worked until well past sundown, waking up well before sunrise. So most of their rest would actually take place during the middle of the day. The Anasazi are also very famous from this area. They live in pueblos, so they took the adobe idea and they built houses that were 2 to 3 stories high. Their basements then, or the pit houses, became basements to these pueblos, and we call those kivas. And in some areas, the Anasazis actually built these their towns into the cliffs, and they're known as cliff dwellers. Obviously, this would protect them very well from attack. It was a very ornate village that they built, pretty incredible for ancient times, ancient technology. Then we move out east, kind of the Ohio area, Mississippi area. We have the mound builders, such as the Hopewell. Obviously, and they're known for the burial mounds that they left behind. Now, the best thing they did for history was bury their dead with their possessions, so we can tell a lot about them. But one interesting fact is that they built these mounds in designs. So here you can see the head of a serpent that sort of snakes through the forest here, and then has a curly tail there at the end. This is actually an ancient Indian burial site. Obviously, it's designed for the gods to see, because nobody else could have a bird's eye view of these mounds during this time, given the technology. Some of the items buried with the bodies are things like seashells and obsidian arrowheads, which tells us that the eastern woodland Indians had an extensive trade network. They were able to get seashells from Florida and from the coast, also obsidian glass from the Rocky Mountains, through some type of trade. The Mississippian natives come later than the Hopewell. They were a very developed society who had very extensive villages that clearly were built and planned before they were built. And they were also mound builders. And then, okay, so bouncing back to the Arctic region in Alaska, obviously it's frozen and treeless. There's not many plants, so the diet of the Inuit tribes that lived here would have been high in protein. They developed kayaks. They depended on the sea for their food. In the summertime, they could hunt caribou in the forest, but hunting was very difficult in the wintertime, so they depended on the sea. They made their clothing from the skins of animals, and then why not build your house out of ice when that's your most abundant resource? And thus we have the igloo. Here's the terrain, the type of geography that the Inuit had to adapt to. And you have an ancient Inuit kayak, would have been made out of animal skins. From these boats, they would hunt seals and whales and other marine life. Here is another form of Inuit housing that would have been covered with animal skin, and it's made out of whalebone. Believe it or not, the Inuit did hunt whales. Even modern-day ancestors of the Inuit tribes will hunt whales, only today they use explosives. Back in the ancient days, they used their bare hands, clubs, and nets. Okay, on the opposite coast of the United States, the eastern coast, we have the Iroquois. They made houses out of wood. They lived in a very forested area, which made farming somewhat difficult because there wasn't a lot of land that was cleared for traditional, conventional farming. The Iroquois actually refers to a league of 5 tribes who call themselves the Iroquois when they're actually 5 sub-tribes. If you take a look at the names, you might recognize some of these. These names are used by companies and in different areas of the country, and also are part of the English vernacular, all named after native tribes. There's a longhouse made by the Iroquois. You can tell, hopefully, why it gets its name, the Longhouse. And then Native Americans had an extremely extensive trade network, but they didn't speak each other's languages, so they had to use sign language in order to conduct trades. The people who pioneered this sign language were the Plains Indians, who were in the middle of this trade network and responsible for moving a lot of the goods from the East Coast to the West Coast and vice versa. You can see the names, obviously, hopefully some that you recognize as well. Oops, I'm sorry. Let's go back to the Plains Indians. Okay. You also have common sign language there. They develop in a treeless grassland, and they never managed to domesticate the buffalo that they hunted. And so as a result of this, they had to follow their food. So they never settled down to build permanent housing of any kind, and so they had to have portable homes, and thus you have the invention of the teepee. And it's not until after Europeans arrived that the Plains Indians actually domesticate horses, and once they did, their life changed dramatically. But the time period we're talking about, hunting was extremely difficult. You can see in this picture here, they would have to disguise themselves as predators in order to get very close to the buffalo herd in order to shoot a buffalo with a bow and arrow. If you've ever seen like the head of a stuffed buffalo, these things are huge. So it's not exactly an easy thing to do. Many native Plains Indian warriors and hunters would have died by being charged by a buffalo. It's a pretty difficult lifestyle. Other types of geography, like the Floridian Everglades, very difficult areas. They would adapt, though, by building their houses up and off the swampy ground, or living on the edges of the swamp, using the swamp for their daily food source. Now, you don't have the map, but you do have the tribal review, which also includes the Aztec, Inca, and Maya. So you're going to want to listen to that lecture and do the reading before you do the tribal review on that, and I will be posting other assignments soon.